Welcome to this short video on malware investigation and threat hunting. In this video, I intend to discuss with you a general workflow and a general technique that can help you to investigate for malware on a potentially compromised system. This is not a deep dive, but rather a very simplified overview to help you grasp the general technique and concept of investigation and threat hunting. This is the workflow that I've created for attack investigation, malware investigation, and threat hunting. The actual workflow for incident response threat hunting will differ from organization to organization based on the internal cyber incident response process. So, this workflow is not meant to be some kind of standard, but it is rather a general approach that will help you to structure your investigation. And in part one, very quickly and briefly, we will discuss how to find the malware using Microsoft's internal tools such as Process Explorer, investigating network connections to find the malware using netstat. In part 2 we will discuss why it is important to run a malware in the sandbox and what will the report show you and how the report can help you in understanding the different stages of cyber attack. Part 3 is all about documentation, what should go into the report of your malware analysis or threat hunting analysis. Getting started with part 1, where we will discuss using netstat, studying network connections, and Process Explorer to find the malware, the payload. So, investigating network connections, netstat is one of the command line utility that is available on Windows for investigating the network, the open network connections. So, netstat, the command itself, when you run in command prompt, it will display the network statistics, which will give you an idea what all network connections have been opened from your system. And if you combine netstat with these parameters -a, b, o, then you can enrich your network connection report here. -a will resolve the IP addresses into names and plus list out the active network connections. -b will map the executables that have opened the network connection. For example, this network connection here was opened by PowerShell.exe. So when I took the screenshot from my lag box, I did not run the -b, and that is the reason I had to additionally open the task manager to show it to you here. Otherwise, if you run netstat -abo, then there is no need for verifying the executable in the task manager. That information will be populated here in a separate column itself. So netstat-abo will give you the executable that has opened the network connection, the active network connections for and the listening ports for both TCP and UDP, and O will map out the process IDs of the executables to the network connection. Once you have the network connections populated with the process ID and process name, then manually combing through the network connections can give you an indication of which connections can be malicious. For example, this is the screenshot from one of my lab boxes, which I purposely infected with the QBot malware. And if you see here, these three network connections seemed to me to be malicious because of two reasons. One is the primary reason is the naming convention of this network connection of the server to which my lab box was connecting to. It is, as you can see, it is a Baumann Inspect Electrical Aisle. These are the names which are usually not mm, in line with the typical naming convention of the IT environment. So that became my one indication that this could be a malicious connection. Apart from that, the executable, the script that that the malicious script that got executed, it was a PowerShell script. And if you see here, these three connections were opened by the PowerShell. Rest of the network connections, when I analyzed them, those were opened by the different applications that were installed on my lab box, and they seemed to be genuine to me. But these three connections seemed to be malicious to me due to the naming convention indication due to the process that had opened these network connections. So in this way, you will be able to narrow down to the malicious network connection, and then you will be able to find the executable that has opened those network connections, and then what file is associated with those executables will be your malicious file, your malware. And you will, when a malware is executed on the system, it will always try to call home to the command and control server to report home that it is successfully executed. Then calling home, it will try to take some additional commands for compromising the system or the network, or it will send some information from the system to the server. So that is the reason you will always see a network connection when a malware is executed on the system. So in this way, analyzing the network connections on a Windows system can lead you to finding the malware from the system. On Linux, the equivalent command for netstat is ss, which is short for socket statistics, which then combined with additional parameters like lsof, which is list of open files, -p, can then give you the same form of report and can help you to find the malware on a Linux system. If using netstat you were not able to find the malware, then the next tool you should look for is Process Explorer. It is a Microsoft sysinternal tool which is available for freely to use under general public license. You can install the tool, and with Process Explorer you can see it is giving you 10 times more information than the regular task manager. So here under Process Explorer, any executables that do not have a description, a company name, and a verified signature in front of them become your shortlist for malicious payload. The Process Explorer also has an integration with virustotal.com, wherein if you enable this check, then it will submit the hash of these executables to VirusTotal, and then in case if the payload is seen out there in the wild by the security companies, then you can get something like this under detection that 47 vendors are detecting this as malicious. But in a 0-day sample where the sample is not seen by the security vendors, it's the first time it's used in an attack campaign, then in those cases, VirusTotal uh, API will not help you here with any information. So in that case, this indication of not having the company name, not having the description, not having a signature present will become your strong indication that the file is malicious. Why? Because hackers will not go to the trouble of getting their binaries signed with a digital signature using a digital certificate. That would mean revealing their identity. So the binaries the attackers will use, the executables the attackers will use, will always be unsigned binaries. And the, the signature part will be missing, the description part, the company name would be missing. So this becomes your strong indication that the file is malicious. Then you can explore to the path of the file, analyze it more in depth, pick it up, and just try to run it in a sandbox and see whether your conclusion is right. So these are two methods of or two techniques that I employed usually for finding the malware. Now stage two is all about once you have found the malware, you will zip it in a password protected file, and then you will collect it, and then you will run it in a sandbox environment. Why running in a sandbox environment is important? This falls under the scope of threat hunting. Under the incident response scope, you will just find the malware, you will clean up the system, you will try to restore the operations to normal. But in threat hunting, then you will use the malware samples, you will run them in a sandbox environment, you will try to find the potential indicators of compromise. What are the IPs that the malware was trying to call to? What are the domain names the malware was trying to call to? Using those indicators of compromise, then you will search through your network to see if there are any additional systems that are compromised, to see if the threat actor is still holding a foot in your network, hiding somewhere. So that is why threat hunting is important. And then once you have the report from the sandbox. And once the Mitri matrix is populated, using the Mitri matrix, once you figure out what are the techniques and tactics that the attacker is employing in this cyber attack, it will become easy for you to find out whether there are any additional threats lurking in your environment. So that is the reason studying the malware for its behavior and in-depth analysis becomes important, and it can be done using Joe Sandbox or hybridanalysis.com, which are the two sandbox um, facilities online that I know of. VirusTotal is also another one which has a backend integration with other sandbox vendors. So a free sign up to these websites will allow you to run malicious samples in a controlled environment, and then the report that comes out of these sandbox results is very detailed, and it can really give you an idea of what the malware was trying to do, how it managed to evade the defenses, what it was doing to what technique it was employing to elevate its privilege. And I have already posted 2 3 videos on my channel for MITRE attack framework, how it can help you to find out the different tactics and techniques and procedures that were used in the cyber attack by the attacker during different stages. So you can go through those videos and you will understand how then the sandbox analysis will help you in threat hunting, etc. In stage three, let's come to the documentation part. Documenting your investigation report is very important, because then you can use that as a training material to give a training to your team, or you can create your threat library for your organization and save these reports there, to which can further help in future for threat modeling and those kind of things. uh, and plus, then once you document the report, it kind of makes a permanent imprint in your mind, and it kind of makes you more effective and more capable in your future threat investigations. So what all will go into the documentation? Executive summary in the first chapter, which can give a brief about how the attacker managed to gain a foothold. What was the initial access vector? Was it phishing? Was it exploiting some public facing application? Was it some supply chain software? How did the attacker gain the entry initially into your network? Execution, in execution, was it a script that got executed, or was it something else, a DLL? How the malware was, what was the execution stage? Privilege escalation, what happened in the privilege escalation stage? What techniques were used by the attacker? Did he use some techniques of copying the code into another exes, and stuff like that? Defense evasion, how the defenses were evaded, how the firewall was bypassed, proxy were bypassed, your antivirus was bypassed, what kind of techniques were employed. So all these, this understanding, you will get it from the sandbox analysis report, which will give you a detailed analysis of this, and plus your additional research that you will do on this. But in the executive summary, you don't need to give the exact technical details. This chapter will be focused for the senior management, the non-technical leadership, who will just read the summary and get a basic hold of the attack that happened. Discovery of the attack. In this second chapter, you can discuss how the attack was discovered. Was it through some alert from some tool, or was it the user himself raising the security incident, um, something like that. Overview of tactics, techniques, procedures used in the attack. As I said, the analyzing the malware in the sandbox environment will give you a detailed overview of what tactic, techniques, procedures were used. Referencing to the MITRE attack framework will also help you to understand the techniques that were used by the attacker. Same thing, defense evasion, you can figure it out. Chapter on gap analysis, any misconfigs that are there in the security tools that you have implemented, or any processes that are missing from the organization for incident response and threat hunting, can go into this chapter. Remediation, then filling these gaps with new tools, or fixing misconfigs in the tools, or maybe a custom policy to block certain kind of attachments on your email gateway, or certain kind of execution on your endpoints. Like you can think of having a group policy in place which will um, stop the users from executing binaries which are not signed with a digital signature, something like that. But all this will require thorough testing, and so such kind of remediations you can list in this last chapter. So this is what will go into your documentation. So I hope this video was helpful in giving you a general grasp of the concept of how to investigate for a malware, what will fall under the scope of threat hunting, and what will go into the documentation. So thank you for your time, and then I will see you in the next video.